In the news tonight, His Majesty the King and the Mexican President hold talks on economic and trade ties, and the King also meets with members of the Mexican Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Mexico City. Jordanians mark the 15th anniversary of the passing of His Majesty King Hussein and the assumption of constitutional powers by His Majesty King Abdullah II. And Syria evacuates some 83 civilians from a besieged area of Hims in the first stage of a planned 3-day humanitarian ceasefire in the city. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. On the second day of his visit to Mexico, His Majesty King Abdullah met with Mexican President Enrique Pena Nieto in Mexico City and discussed means to enhance economic, trade, investment and tourism cooperation in addition to developments in the Middle East. The King also met with economic figures as well as members of the Mexican Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry, during which he briefed them on Jordan's efforts to develop the national economy. Here are the details.
His Majesty the King's visit to Mexico City aims at boosting Jordan's ties with Mexico and other Latin American nations. His Majesty held talks with President Enrique Peña Nieto in which they highlighted the need to forge closer cooperation in various fields and implement joint projects in the educational field. The two leaders also discussed the latest political developments in the Middle East, especially efforts to bring about peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis based on a two-state solution. They also discussed the Syria crisis and its ramifications.
Obviously, our region has many challenges. The issue of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process is something of tremendous importance. And again, we believe that Mexico, with its international strength, plays a very important role. And we hope that, obviously, we're looking for a lasting and peaceful solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict as the only way to achieving security and stability for all of us in the Middle East and beyond. We'll also be discussing the challenges of Syria, and again I think the voice of Mexico plays a very important role, where we will be able to hopefully bring peace and stability to this very unfortunate issue, where again through the international community we all are calling a political solution to the Syria crisis, so that we can give dialogue a chance based on the Geneva Communique, Geneva I and the ongoing Geneva II process.
The Mexican president, for his part, expressed appreciation for the King's effort to achieve stability in the Middle East and said Mexico was ready to coordinate with Jordan to address challenges facing the region. He also highlighted the need to boost cooperation between the two countries.
The signing of agreements between the two countries today reflects our keenness to further boost bilateral ties in various fields. Jordan is so important as it signed free trade agreements with the United States and Canada, and when we sign such an agreement with your country, we will be able to promote our economic relations on the long run. Your Majesty, your visit to our country and your meetings with the economic leaders will contribute to enhancing joint efforts to forge closer economic and investment ties between our two countries.
Meanwhile, the two leaders attended the signing of a number of agreements to boost cooperation in various educational, cultural, technical, and tourism fields. Moreover, a framework for a free trade agreement between Jordan and Mexico was also signed. His Majesty also laid a wreath at the memorial to Mexican soldiers who fell in the Mexican-American War. His Majesty also met with economists and member of the Mexican Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry, during which the King affirmed that Jordan made big strides in enhancing the performance of the national economy on the various tracks. He also spoke about legislation to promote economic activities and the Comprehensive Development March. From Mexico, His Majesty will head to California for summit talks with U.S. President Barack Obama on regional development, including the Mideast peace process in Syria. Faraj Looney for the News at 10.
Jordanians today mark the 15th anniversary of the passing of His Majesty King Hussein, who died on February 7, 1999, following a battle with cancer. On the same day, 15 years ago, His Majesty King Abdullah assumed constitutional powers as he was proclaimed king. At the time of his death, King Hussein was the longest-serving executive head of state in the world. Throughout his 5-decade rule, the late king worked hard to raise the living standards of his people, and during his reign, the literacy rate dramatically rose. King Hussein's commitment to democracy, civil liberties, and human rights helped make Jordan a model state in the region. Enhancing joint Arab coordination was a priority for King Hussein, who believed that solving outstanding issues and conflicts between Arab countries should be done through upholding the higher Arab interest and believing in the common destiny of the Arab nation. On the occasion, His Royal Highness Prince Raad bin Zayed, the regent, visited the tomb of the late king, where he laid a wreath and recited verses from the Holy Quran. A number of royal family members, the Prime Minister, as well as top civil and military officials, also visited the tomb of the late king. Jordan condemned an assault by Israeli soldiers on Palestinians performing Friday prayer at Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Jerusalem. State Minister for Media Affairs and Government spokesman Mohammed Al-Momani denounced the attack by Israeli forces, who fired tear gas and rubber bullets on worshippers. Momani urged the international community to pressure the Israeli occupation authorities to end these violations that undermine U.S. and international efforts to ensure the success of the peace process. And following Friday prayers, occupation forces raided the Al-Aqsa compound, one of Islam's holiest sites, and fired stun grenades at worshippers they alleged were throwing stones at police officers. An Israeli police spokesperson said 7 people were arrested during the 2-hour operation. And in the West Bank, Palestinian youths from Jalzon refugee camp near Ramallah clashed with Israeli troops. Troops fired tear gas and rubber-coated bullets to disperse the crowds. There were no reports of casualties. Earlier in the West Bank, Israeli forces raided a makeshift village near Jericho, ejecting activists who had tried to inhabit the area in a protest against Israeli settlements. Palestinian activists launched the Milh al-Ard, Salt of the Earth campaign in the direct Jordan Valley village of Ain Hijle last week, with the aim of refusing the political status quo, especially given futile peace negotiations, destroying the rights of Palestinians for liberation and claim to their land. But at dawn today, occupation forces broke up the group and arrested dozens, while as many as 40 activists were injured.
This is a result of the success of the popular resistance, which they are trying to break, but they will not succeed in breaking it. However, the way they attacked us was very violent. They attacked the women and the children and beat people up, including us. They beat up everyone without discrimination, and they fired stun grenades and wounded dozens. They came in large numbers with their armored vehicles, but that will not break our will. The popular resistance will continue, and we will be victorious, and we will return to Ain Hijle.
Israel's foreign minister defended the U.S. Secretary of State, whose Middle East peace drive has seen mounting criticism from within the Israeli government. The conciliatory remarks by Avigdor Lieberman, who has previously been a vocal critic of international efforts to set up a Palestinian state on occupied territory, could help John Kerry cobble together consensus for pursuing the peace negotiations. During a press conference, Lieberman said Kerry is a true friend of Israel, adding that he does not understand any logic in turning a friend into a foe. Over to Syria, where 3 busloads of civilians from a besieged area of Hims were evacuated today, the first stage of a planned 3-day humanitarian ceasefire in the city. The buses, carrying dozens of weary-looking evacuees, accompanied by Syrian Arab Red Crescent officials, arrived at a meeting point outside Hims, but there were differing reports about where they were headed. By the afternoon, about 80 people had been evacuated, and an aid group said it expected 200 people to leave. The deal is the first positive result of peace talks, which were launched 2 weeks ago between Syria's warring foes and resume on Monday in Geneva. Meanwhile, the World Food Programme said it had trucks ready to take a month's supply of food tomorrow to the estimated 2,500 hungry and malnourished people who have been trapped for months in the rebel-held heart of the city. In Egypt, 2 explosive devices detonated near a police checkpoint in Giza on the outskirts of the capital, Cairo, wounding 6 people, 4 of them policemen. The Interior Ministry said 6 people were hospitalized but did not specify their injuries. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the blasts. Egypt has seen a wave of protests and violence since the army ousted Islamist President Mohamed Morsi last year amid mass protests against his rule. British Prime Minister David Cameron made an emotional appeal for Scotland to remain part of the United Kingdom, warning Scots a vote for independence would undermine Britain's global clout and imperil its financial and political stability. Speaking in London, Cameron made his most passionate defence yet of the UK, saying he would fight with all he had to hold the country he governs together. Scots will decide in a referendum in September whether their nation, which has a population of just over 5 million, should end its 307-year-old union with England and leave the UK. A yes vote would place the future of Britain's Scotland-based nuclear submarine fleet in doubt and potentially weaken the UK's claim to a permanent seat in the United Nations. U.S. comedian Leno said an emotional goodbye to The Tonight Show, wrapping up his 22 years as host of the NBC late-night program. Leno, who took over one of the U.S. broadcast television's marquee programs in 1992 from Johnny Carson, is handing the reins over to Jimmy Fallon. Fallon will be taking The Tonight Show from its Burbank, California studio to New York, where it first began. During the 22 years, Leno has been joined on the couch by celebrities, politicians, athletes, and pop culture figures. A special So Long Farewell from The Sound of Music was performed for Leno by Billy Crystal and Jack Black.
There's a sad sort of clanging from the clock in the hall, and the bells in the steeple too. And all the executives that run NBC are popping in to say you're through. You're through. You're through. You're through. Regretfully they tell me, but firmly they compel me to say goodbye to you. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Black. So long, farewell, I'll be there, and my dear, if Valentine's, you'll be back here next year.
And over to New York and the first day of the Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week. Japanese-born American designer Tadashi Shoji showed his Moorish-inspired Fall 2014 collection with dresses and evening gowns with architectural details. He used suede, velvet, and lace on gowns and opted for a strong color palette with reds, greens, and blues. The Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week will run through the 13th. And from New York, we go to Brussels for the first Salon de Chocolat fashion show and festival. Chefs and designers collaborated to create dresses and outfits made of chocolate. More than 90 chocolatiers are attending, including international chocolate powerhouses Godiva and Neuhaus.
About what you have done to me.
Russian President Vladimir Putin declared the Sochi Winter Games officially open at a high-octane opening ceremony before 40,000 spectators. He was joined by leaders from China, Japan, and 40 other countries. Athletes emerged from beneath the stage upper ramp for the traditional parade, and a giant satellite image of each nation taken from space was projected onto the floor. However, the ceremony got off to a shaky start when one of the 5 Olympic rings failed to open, meaning the symbol could not be illuminated with fireworks as planned. And ahead of the ceremony, thousands of fans gathered in Sochi's Olympic Park, the place where the opening and closing ceremonies, medal presentations, and indoor sporting events will take place. The state-of-the-art arena, one of several construction projects that have swelled the budget of the Winter Games to a record $50 billion, holds 40,000 people. Millions watched on television and via the internet the Winter Olympics, the first Russia hosts. And finally, cold weather tonight with the appearance of some clouds, while winds will be northeasterly light to moderate. Frost formation is expected past midnight in all parts of the kingdom, including the northern Jordan Valley. As for tomorrow, a slight rise in temperature is expected, though it will remain relatively cold in most parts of the country. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect relatively cold conditions tonight, but fair tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and slightly choppy seas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. His Majesty the King and the Mexican President hold talks on economic and trade ties, and the King also meets with members of the Mexican Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Mexico City. Jordanians mark the 15th anniversary of the passing of His Majesty King Hussein and the assumption of constitutional powers by His Majesty King Abdullah II. And Syria evacuates some 83 civilians from a besieged area of Hims in the first stage of a planned 3-day humanitarian ceasefire in the city. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Khan. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow.